Tanzia is a story of magic and mystery, telling the tale of a young shaman sent from his homeland by his grandfather for his own protection. Now, years later, the threat of the Skeleton King has risen again, and you must return to save your people. But is this game genuinely magic, or is it all just smoke and mirrors? Let's find out. Tanzia contains light RPG elements in that you will gain EXP points for discovering new areas, defeating enemies and completing side quests. Earning enough of these will see your character level up and thus become stronger. You can also gather items that you find in the game world, as well as learn new spells and abilities that will aid you as the enemies become tougher. Even with these RPG elements, this is a 3D action-adventure game first and foremost. You are sent from one town to the next, fulfilling a mixture of story and side quests, and will talk to the natives as you go along, and every so often you will unlock a cutscene that tells a bit more of the story.
Feel a great demon beast.
The first hour of the game is a series of fetch quests, whether you are collecting feathers, plants from the beach, or poo in the forest. You will be playing errand boy for everyone in the village. Any other quests you receive involve killing a certain number of a particular enemy, and in all honesty, it's not the most exhilarating of starts and really does hamper the early experience. The problem is it never really seems to move much beyond this, and you will still find the majority of your time being directed to ask around the village to see if anyone knows anything, or finding a certain item and bringing it back to a particular person. For a game about a Skeleton King, alchemy and a returning hero, it's all just a little bit dull. Each town has an alchemy shop, and here you can buy a variety of potions that will assist you on your way, by refilling your health or your mana for example. You can also buy recipes from the alchemist to then make your own potions, rather than having to buy them, and provided you have the relevant components, you can make these as and when you need them. This is a nice touch, and it does add an interesting layer to the game. Combat though is certainly a weak point in this game, and manages to get in the way of the gameplay rather than enhance it. Early combat equates to running around in circles waiting for your magic spells to recharge before using them again, as your melee weapon is just so weak.
Turtle power!
Even then, the enemy seems to resist your attack half the time and takes no damage. In fact, you feel woefully underpowered for a lot of the game, with the enemies pursuing you relentlessly as soon as they spot you, making it very hard for you to escape. I was beginning to feel a bit like Sarah Connor with Arnie the Terminator after me at times. The hit detection also seems a little off, with nice big chunks of your health bar disappearing when it doesn't always look like the enemy has touched you. I mean, look at this here, he's not even touching me. I mean, what's he using to hurt me at this point? Colourful language? Do me a favour. This all necessitates the need to sometimes think outside the box in terms of how best to advance while avoiding combat altogether in certain missions. This can be achieved again using the alchemy with things such as invisibility potions, and whilst I do like that the game seems to encourage you to think this way, it should have been done by more intuitive storytelling rather than by making the combat so underwhelming and laborious that you feel forced into avoiding combat at all at times. One other annoyance is that in order to access the map you must pause the game. You do not have the map available to you on the user interface, and it does become tedious having to keep pausing the game to see where you are going. The map is also greyed out until you've been somewhere, so sometimes it's not overly clear how you need to get to your next marker, leading to you stumbling around until you eventually find a pathway that you have not yet taken. It's not awful at all, and I never felt completely lost, it just could have been so much more user friendly than it is. Tanzia boils down to a series of fetch quests and other equally uninspiring missions that are broken up by an interesting alchemy mechanic and then ultimately let back down again by a very uninspired combat. Gameplay gets 11 out of 20. Tanzia has gone for a 3D game world and harkens back to the 3D action-adventure games of old. It has a real PlayStation 2, GameCube sort of vibe to it, almost in quite a similar way to another recent Switch release, The Legend of K. Of course, that game actually did start out as a PS2 game, years ago, and Tanzia certainly feels like it wouldn't have been out of place itself had it been released back in that time too. Although the game certainly looks colourful enough, and some of the areas, such as the Turtle Beach and the lagoon, have a very aesthetically pleasing look to them, closer inspection reveals a lot of flat textures. And pop-up. Cutscenes are hand-drawn and play out in a comic book style, and these all have a professional feeling to them. And it's also nice to have a developer try to do a 3D game world and not follow the 2D retro style crowd that is so fervent these days. Unfortunately, none of this changes the fact that for all the bright colours and serene settings and locations, this game feels quite dated and probably wouldn't have looked out of place in about 2004. Graphics get 13 out of 20. Each new area has its own tune, and some of these are actually quite pleasant. Bizarrely though, the music track is very short, and once it runs out, there is just no more music and you are merely left with the ambient sounds until you reach the next area, whereby another music track will play. Whilst I'm not saying I would rather the music constantly loop, they could have perhaps had a little more of it than the 30-second, maybe a minute of music that you get before you are left with just the sounds of nature. After all, there is only so long a man can listen to seagulls squawking. Cutscenes are fully voice acted, although everything in-game is done through text boxes. Audio receives 13 out of 20. The game controls fairly well, with the left stick being used to move and the right stick controlling the camera. Having criticised the game for feeling very dated at times, I will praise it in that the camera is quite good and I had no real issues with it at all. In fact, it cooperated with me for the majority of the time. The L and the R buttons cycle through any spells or items that you have assigned to the bar at the bottom of the screen, and the ZR button then uses them. B is your jump and Y uses your melee weapon. The menus are a little more cumbersome to use, and there are quite a few of them to get used to. However, they do start to become second nature the longer you play, and controls do their job well enough, and they receive 15 out of 20. Tanzia costs £16.99 or $19.99, and for this price you are getting a fairly lengthy experience. However, I do not feel that the price reflects the quality of the experience. There are a lot of side quests to attempt as well as the main storyline, but these are all quite mundane and I couldn't muster the enthusiasm to carry a lot of them out. Value receives 13 out of 20. To conclude, Tanzia tries hard to replicate the 3D action-adventure games of old, and for better or worse, manages this at times. Whilst it has got the look and feel of those games just right, it has also managed to replicate the flaws that these games had too. Tanzia is not a bad game, not at all, and there are far worse games out there on the Switch right now. But it is quite an average game, painfully average at times to be honest, and all the while I was playing, whilst I did have moments of fun with it, I kept catching myself glancing over at the Switch games on my shelf, wondering what I could be playing instead. If you enjoy these type of games, then you will have fun with Tanzia. For everyone else, you might want to wait for a sale on this one, and Tanzia receives a SwitchUp score of 65%. Thanks as always everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like down below, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to SwitchUp for all things Switch all the time. And as always, happy gaming.